Hello, everyone, and welcome to New Amber Academy webinar. We are really happy to have you here with us. And as usually, it's me, Andrea Motok, Learning and Development Manager in Amber. And I am here with Bill Mooney, our guest speaker and a very dear partner of Amber, that will share today a lot of things from his experience. First of all, just to make a short introduction and stall until other people are able to join, because this is how live works, right? First of all, those of you who don't know Amber yet, we are a full-service game development agency, and Amber Academy is our learning program that has gone beyond the borders of our company, and it has reached right now with the pandemic. And not only, we wanted to reach everyone in the industry who wants to invest in their development. So we have various topics every time, a new speaker, a different topic that you can learn from. And we decided to do this to bring experts in the industry to teach you or to answer to questions and curiosities. And hence, let's all develop our skill set and knowledge on the industry. Some logistics before we go forward. One important is that you will have the chance to interact with us, even if we don't see you, if we are not face-to-face, we have the possibility to interact through the Q&A section of the webinar here, if you are here with us in Zoom. If you are watching on Facebook, because we are live there too, well, no worries at all. You have the comment section. Please add all your questions there. Without further ado, I just want to say that I'm really grateful to have Bill here with us, accepting our invitation. We will have him for 1 hour. He has vast experience in the industry. You would hear him associated with big names in the industry: Electronic Arts, King, Roblox, Zynga, Skills, and not only, now he's the CEO of Proteus Games. He has 12 years plus of experience in live ops, and with this type of experience, he couldn't have chosen a better topic for today. So he will talk about live ops today and free to play. So any curiosity you have, do not hesitate. Use the Q&A section. We'll make sure we stop and ask Bill everything that you want to know. It's a very good opportunity to find out from someone who actually tested a lot of things and really had success with all of that. So Bill, thank you for joining us. The mic is yours. I'm looking forward to find out more, as well as our participants.
Thank you, Andrea. So, hi, everybody. Please feel free to ask questions during the course of this presentation. I've intentionally kept the deck pretty short, figuring that people will hopefully remember 2 things or 3 things. So I'll jump right in, but please ask all your questions, and I'm happy to talk about a broad variety of things. So with no further ado, what is free to play? So free to play, oops, excuse me, that was my beat. Free to play, the basics.
Bill, if you can please share your screen as well, so we can have some visuals.
That would be good. Sorry.
That would be great. Yeah, no worries.
Let's try that now. Sorry, thought I had it shared. Okay, so
I know you have a great presentation as background, so we need to see it.
We'll try it again. Okay, so the basics of free to play. So let's see, and it doesn't show. So the graphic was comparing Candy Crush to World of Warcraft. Free to play may not seem like it, but what it really is operating a massive multiplayer online game. So really, here are the key elements. If you remember only 3 things, this slide is the summary of the essence of a free to play service. All free to play mobile games, and I focus on mobile, but it's true for other, are built around the following: a core gameplay built around grinding, because that's what you do. Multiple progression tracks so that you can be making progress on a steady basis. Content treadmills, which for you as a game maker is probably the most challenging part of operating a live service, and I'm spending some time talking about it. And then, and this is critical, social interaction. On mobile, that tends to be asynchronous, by which I mean it's not occurring at the same time. Give somebody something, play in a clan, move a line. On mobile, typically you don't count on people all being there at the same time, but it is an important aspect to think about how people interact with and play with each other, because to keep people for a long period of time, we all know this as gamers, there has to be a world to live in, not just a single experience that I complete and master. So when I talk about live services, and typically there's the game design part, and they do connect, I talk about sort of when you're operating a live service, it's usually how do you keep your game growing, succeeding, and people continuing to enjoy it. And that tends to be very numbers based. I would argue that you use numbers at the beginning when you figure out what game to make, because you think about numbers if you want to make a living. And then you think about it when you get to live service to say, is my game functioning? Am I doing the things that are improving? And this is a formulation that there are a number of similar things. I chose Zynga's, which is my favorite: reach, retention, and revenue. And these are the numbers that you should decide when you do things to your game. Is it improving at least one of these numbers? And I'm going to come across very sort of clinical describing how to do this as a business, but it's important from a game design standpoint that people understand that doing it well is you're making it fun and serving these. And in fact, the features that tend to work the best move all of them together. If I had to focus on one of these three, the most important long-term is retention. Do people keep playing your game? Do they stay? Are they leaving? And so I want to briefly talk about retention, then I'll jump to reach and revenue. Engagement is how many people who play your game are playing today. Payer engagement, pretty obvious, is for the people who pay, how many of them are playing today? And usually in mobile, you should count on a small percentage of people paying money to pay for everybody else. That's why free to play. So, but you really want to watch what the players who pay do in your game. Churn, when do people leave, for both regular players and for people who pay? And you want to track these carefully. The other two, reach, is straightforward. It is basically how many new users are coming in. UA is user acquisition. Am I buying ads somewhere, typically on Facebook and Instagram, maybe Twitter, and then other sources which have varied quality. And then organic installs, which are basically all the installs that you didn't buy and you're not quite sure where they come from. I'm joking a little bit in saying that stuff like being high up in the App Store rating for people who care about mobile, a feature on Steam, that kind of thing applies. And then revenue. So retention is the most important long-term. Revenue, especially if you're a smaller company, is determining, are you paying your bills? So there, what I'm looking for is, are people buying twice or more? Because that shows that I'm giving them something that they have value. Are there whales? That's sort of slang in the industry for people who pay a lot. Because again, only a few people pay, and of the payers, a few pay way more than everybody else. And then a more technical term is depth of spend. And what this really refers to is, can people keep spending money on your game and find value in it? Depending what level you are as the listener, you may care about different points of this. But in all of this, the first thing, I tried to put the first value, the most important related topic first. So for UA, if you have a game, are you buying traffic? Is that traffic useful? Retention, are your players continuing to play? At what frequency? And then on revenue, you know how much money you're making. Are people buying again? Because if they're not, you're not doing it right. Unless you're selling box, in which case this is the wrong talk for you. Okay, so a key thing is you're going to do a lot of stuff, and if the KPI doesn't get better, don't keep the thing in your game, because otherwise your game turns into this. And I'm joking, but I'll show you a picture a little later of EVE Online, guys who I've known for years. Good people, good game. I'm going to show you one of their screens, and I would not know what to do with it. But seriously, this is an important thing. One of the key things in live services is that you want to present new stuff, but stuff that is there for a while and then you remove so that your game doesn't become overwhelming for newer players or people who loved your game and then come back later. Okay, what exactly are live ops? So this hopefully sets up what you're trying to do. Live ops are things you do to basically keep your players happy and improve your KPIs. And both are important. So weekly services, you all know this as players. We all started this way of like, I want a new thing. Oh, this game sucks. I don't have anything new. You have to give new people stuff every week, forever. Content hell. You may hear people who've worked in the industry already talk about the content treadmill, content furnace. It's the problem of just coming up with stuff 2 years in. People still want 20 things to buy. What 20 things are you building that they actually want? And I picked an example of some dude here who has been playing Farmville since February 2010 daily, has reached level 1446 and has played so much. And there are people like him. Now, he has never spent money, which is very uncommon for this kind of user, but you have people who have played your game from the beginning, who play it more than you, and who are better at your game than you if you have skill in your game. He wants stuff every day, and what he wants is very different than that player who just showed up for the first time. And finding that balance there between keeping your hardcore happy and keeping your game accessible to new people is critical to have a successful live service. Okay, this is a critical point. I told you sort of what the essence of live services is. Here's the second point that you should not forget. You want to build systems, not features. The key thing here is if you build a system, you building something that you can use again and again and again. Because ultimately, if you're going to be a good game maker, if I add something to my game, I have to make sure it works with everything else. If I add a feature, it has to interact with everything else. And every time I build a feature, I have to balance it with everything. If I build a system and I know the underlying parts of my system are right, I can make stuff using that system and not have to worry that it's going to break the rest of my game. Also, systems have fewer bugs, which is a big deal, especially if you're a small team and have to do your own QA or have one unlucky person finding all your bugs. So, and I picked on EVE Online. Hopefully you can see the screenshot here. This is some chat window where an experienced player would literally see this. You can insert your own favorite Eastern MMO too. They're notoriously bad for this, where you'll see your character in the middle, and then it's just an explosion of text and menus. But how are you going to use this? And everything you do messes with it.
Bill, okay. We have a really important question just came up right now. So Hector wants to know, how do you keep those elder players engaged with the new stuff without overwhelming new players with too much going on?
So I think one of the key things to understand about live ops is that you have your progression for the player that they progress at their own place and their own pace. So, they start at early level, they work up, and you're introducing features. One of the tricks of doing good live ops is you're doing something that's accessible for the very new player to the very experienced player. Experienced players feel mastery over your game. They love exploring the nooks and crannies. So what you're really trying to do is, with stuff like content, you have to think, can a new player enjoy this? Does it give the new player something useful? And then is it fun for the elder player at a much deeper level? And so I would say the shorter answer is build for the elder player and then simplify for the newer player. Mm-hmm. So for example, if you're running an event where, for example, and I'll show an example in a minute of a Candy Crush thing, let's say you're running a holiday event, very typical. You're running a Christmas event. And I'm focusing on sort of the Western market, particularly North America. Obviously, this would apply to different markets. So I'm building a Christmas event or a holiday event where people have to collect 5 characters or 20 buildings or whatever. So for an elder player, what I would do is give them some benefit that they find interesting. Maybe I have a system for prestige, something that an elder player varies. But for the beginning player, I would make sure that they could participate as well. So for example, I might tune, let's say there are 5 characters. I would probably make the first couple really easy to get, and I might make the last couple very difficult to get so that the elders don't just zip through the content, because they're the ones that actually care about character 5. The newbies are busy, are probably having a lot going on and don't understand what to focus on. So make sure they can get a couple characters, and then you could sort of make the end of an event more challenging, sort of for the trophy for the hardcore players. That's a good example.
And I think we also have like a follow-up on the question. For sure, you gave a very interesting idea there. It's a different perspective on looking at the newcomers. So the newcomer, this person says, the newcomer can feel like an ant among gods. Why would the ant want to play without feeling meaningless?
So this is a really interesting question. I think most of us have had that experience where a game's already been around for a while. We join it, we love it. So there are some techniques that you can use. One of the things is to incentivize elders to be nice to newbies. So for example, being an example as a hardcore thing, you might have junior players in a clan generate a lot more value so that elder players have an incentive to get new players, be nice to them, and thus benefit the clan as a whole. And there are really two parts. There is the extrinsic, give me something for me doing something, always critical. And then the subjective of make the person a guide. MMOs have been doing this for years. If you're nice and you help newbies, you get a little badge, you get to be a guide or a host or whatever. And you want to explore both. So let's get a little more specific on that. So I am an elder player. Hector is a brand new player, mentioning the questioner before. So Hector comes in. If I have a clan, I might have 10 spots reserved for new people to get him in, to welcome him. And I like him because I'm farming him for clan experience because he's generating it faster than elder players. And I'll be nice to him because I want him to play. So that's sort of the cynical, I get something, so make me do that. The positive side is you give me a little badge that says, you know what, Bill's helped 20 new players, or new players give Bill's a thumbs up, and Bill then has a little gold star for being a host or a guide or whatever. People will be motivated by that as well. And it's also sort of by measuring it, you're indicating to the player that it matters and that they should grind towards it. And if you give a measure of them being nice, many people, even if they're not as great as you wish otherwise, will grind to get the nice badge. Again, I'm thinking of it very systematically and very functionally, but hopefully you're seeing sort of the thing I'm describing. And I would say really getting into the weeds here, if you think about your power curve for rewards and for grind, if you have that sort of strong logarithmic approach or that almost exponential approach, the first chunk is easy for everybody. And then the elder part, the latter part of the curve is accessible only to the most hardcore. That is generally a very good way to design. You'll see that across many, many games. And it fits that psychology of what I'm describing. Is that helpful? Feel free to ask more questions if I've gone too deep or too fast.
It's great. Okay. I think we can go on, and for sure more questions will jump in.
Good. Okay, so I talked about how do you plan for the long term. So you're thinking about a system you're going to build for live ops. Literally a filter question I use is, what am I going to do with it in year 3? Right? And that sounds like an incredible amount of time, but the reality that's interesting is with live services as a whole, they last forever. I mean, people are still playing, how many people? World of Warcraft is still making a ton of money. It's been around for 16 years. You know, Candy Crush, I think, is 2011. It's still top 3 on mobile. It was number 1 until pretty recently. Roblox is 17 years old. I mean, these things, Roblox is different. And if anyone's curious, I can talk a little bit about it. But it's important to understand that these things last and last and last and last. And even you can grow over a long period of time. Something that people might find interesting. I was looking at this. I was doing some research on this to give you an idea. Some games that you might not think of are still growing, that are bigger now than they were in 7, 8, 9 years ago. Games on mobile like Covet Fashion, Design Home, Bingo Blitz. These are games that are really, I mean, they're 7 or 8 years old and they're reaching their peak numbers now. And that's not just because of COVID, but they've been just steadily growing and growing. And so this is where it's a very different business. Now, there comes a point where inevitably you reach your peak and you come down. World of Warcraft. But the reality is World of Warcraft is still a monster compared to all these other games. And they've had 16, 14, 15 years. There are probably people on the team whose parents worked on the team. So it is a different kind of approach. And that's why I think of year 3, because usually if you've built the game, the first year you can think of a bunch of stuff you want to do, right? It's pretty straightforward. The second year, it's hard, but it's the stuff you didn't get to in year 1. But in year 3, the reason I suggest that is you're like, what is a system that I'll be able to make 20 things from? And I use a lot here. I'm talking about very, very popular games. Unfortunately, you didn't see the little graphic I made with World of Warcraft, but I'm choosing Candy Crush, Warcraft, Farmville I happen to have a lot of insight into. But you can look at the top of the charts for these games, right? And Candy has done something like 42 different events, and I know they've reused some of them, where in this particular one, you collect more stars than your opponent. It's a head-to-head. You only get it by completing new stars. If anybody's played Candy Crush, which I'm sure everybody has, you can get between 1 and 3 stars. This is to incentivize people to go back and play levels. It's actually harder for elders because they presumably have gotten more stars. And they give an example of a flow here. But you can reuse that core system a bunch of times. I could have my holiday event where I'm chasing Christmas presents. I could chase Easter bunny eggs, World Cup balls, I don't know, international flags, whatever I can come up with. But by building that system, I know I can use it a lot. Now, you don't want to be completely mechanical and just do the same thing again and again and again. But these systematic things, people actually like them. You have to find a little twist, but people like having a thing that they know how to use and they feel this sense of mastery. So what you want is something that, in ballpark, 85%, 90% the same as the other ones, but here's this little 10% that's different. Not a bad rule for making games, by the way, is 85% like something that people already love. But you get hopefully where I'm going with this. And you say in year 3 is, can I do this 10 times? Is the system going to give me 10 events? Is the system going to give me a clan system? I know I can do a ton of stuff with that. So if I have to choose between some gameplay feature that I'm only going to use once and building a clan system, I certainly myself bias towards the systematic thing, assuming I have enough players, where I know I'm going to be able to use it in a lot of ways. Now, this is very generic. I mentioned the KPIs before, the key performance indicators. You have to look and see what's happening in your game. So I'm giving these as general high-level principles, but part of being good as a game operator as well as a game maker is actually realizing that, you know what, even though I want to build more content, the problem is people are dropping off after 2 days because they don't understand this whole system. I should fix that first. So I'm putting this in the context of you're doing the basic stuff, you're maintaining your game, the game crashes, you have to fix it. So apply common sense on this. But again, think of these things of what is a system I can build, tune it with all the other ones, and then do a bunch of versions. So hopefully that's helpful. Andrea, interrupt me if anybody has questions. So the other thing, this is the third thing I wanted you to know. This sounds bad, but look at what other smart people are doing, right? Everybody thinks that it's so important to be so original. I would argue that nothing that Blizzard has done is original. I can't think of a game genre they've innovated. You could argue Hearthstone, but it looks a lot like Magic to me. Dune was the inspiration for World of Warcraft, EverQuest, Overwatch. They explicitly talked about how much it was based on Call of Duty. Like, don't be precious. The sign, here's the classic newbie thing is I have this really great idea, and then it's Dungeons and Dragons. Don't be that person. The other thing is you get these indie gamers who are like, that's not original. I'm going to do a game about blah, blah, blah. Go ahead. Don't count on it working. If you look at people who are successful, who build games that people love and that can actually make a living in games for a long time, they look at what other people do and then they do their version of it. It's not that you want to blindly copy it, but you're stupid if you don't look at what other smart people do, right? So that's the other thing I really want you to understand. So again, the 3 things you hear is free to play, secretly an MMO, build systems, and third, don't be cute. Do what other smart people do. I gave an example here. Farmville, the stupid lonely cow, has been bugging people for 11 or 12 years. Well, I went back and just to show you, we did about 30 animals as my recollection. I might be wrong, but like it wasn't just, oh, here's the lonely cow, let's come with something brand new. Lonely cow, lonely sheep, lonely dog, lonely kitten, whatever, right? Like, and it's not that you want to drive people insane by turning it into spam, but copy and innovate. That sounds like a weird phrase to say, but that's how I think of it. First, you demonstrate that you understand it, then you make your own tweaks. But like, look not only at yourself and not look not only what you want, but also what other smart people are doing. King in particular is excellent at live ops. Candy Crush is a very straightforward game. If you're looking for monetization, for example, a good feature is they have the piggy bank. You can see that on about half the mobile games. Everybody's done their version of that feature. In fact, King is an excellent place to look for inspiration because they're extremely methodical and they're very careful. They've tested in a bunch of games. If it makes it into Candy Crush, the Candy Crush Prime, the big one, Candy Crush Saga, that is a feature that I guarantee you has worked in 4 other games. And similarly, if you see features, once you see a feature in more than a couple top games, it's probably a feature that you should think about doing. Which one you do depends on your particular game, but they literally will have people that are devoted to doing these basic features. And the thing is, you may be like, oh, that's just a money grab. And of course, it is partially for money. But those features that stick for a long time, like players at least don't hate them, and they actually probably like them. And don't be arrogant and assume that because you don't like something, a player will feel the same way. Don't be arrogant and assume that because you understand a feature, a player will understand it. And my general rule for playtesting is if everybody thinks that they're right. Everybody hates it, they're right. If everybody loves it, they're right. If it's in between, do what you think is the best thing to do and hope that you're correct. But be humble and recognize there are a lot of other smart people to follow. on that topic, here are the games that I would recommend to you if you're sort of live ops, if this is at all new to you. If you do nothing but look at games I list here, again, mostly focused on the West, all focused on mobile, all of these games are really good at live ops in different ways. Candy Crush, I've discussed. Coin Master is a new game. They're excellent at live ops. I picked Gardenscapes, Homescapes. Playrix has done a really good job. They came in against Candy Crush, which was huge, and managed to get to a great position. Clash of Clans. They approach it a little differently, but they've done a great job of keeping the community active and interested. And then two other games that probably a lot of the more hardcore gamers are sort of sneering at or lifting an eyebrow to, which Slotomania is an extremely successful casino product, has been successful for years, monetizes very well, and there are features that you should look at there. And I mentioned Bingo Blitz, another game that's like 8 years old. They do a ton of good live ops. You may find a lot of these games you may like or dislike. I mean, I would bet the hardcore people are like, all those other games are crap except for Clash of Clans. But the point is, look at these people. These are all smart companies that you can go right through. I think, and I'm not certain, the Bingo Blitz and Slotomania are both owned by Playtika. I might be wrong. That's a company that as a whole does an excellent job of live ops. But when in doubt, go look at what these folks are doing and deconstruct it. These are games that I would certainly pay careful attention to myself, and in fact do pay careful attention to. And if you're serious about live ops, like if you're a product manager, if you're lucky that you have a game that's making enough, when it comes to basic stuff, if you just stick on the top 30 top grossing games, they're already really good at this. You can that's your shortcut, right? And it doesn't mean you have to do it exactly like them. You don't have to just do a pure cut and paste, but go into that feature with respect and say, there's something good about this. Okay, I understand it. I'm going to make a little tweak, or I like it just the way it is. Piggy Bank's a good example of a very straightforward feature, and put it in. By the way, I mentioned that Piggy Bank feature, but that basically, just to remind anybody who doesn't know it offhand, is as you're going along, you're completing levels in Candy Crush. I think this is how it works. Periodically, as you complete a level, it puts money in the piggy bank and essentially becomes a better and better deal. So that, let's say, if it would normally cost you $5 for 100 gold bars, the piggy bank gets to 400 gold bars and it costs $2, $2, etc. And what it does is it creates a sense of earned thing that you can pay for. It's a very simple feature. I mean, you maybe wouldn't put it as a piggy in your game, but like that's a good basic feature. And the thing is that the feature that you're going to be super jazzed about? No. But is that the feature that suddenly you have 20% more money and you can hire another developer or buy some more ads or pay your mortgage or, have enough to go on vacation? Yeah. And, you don't want to make your game entirely just a wave of spam, but you want to be realistic and find a balance. And I can tell you loosely my own experience. This is soft and you can or cannot do it. But my usual rule of thumb is I want to do 2 features for the numbers and 1 feature for myself, in the sense of 2 features that make sure it's successful as a business, and 1 feature because I think it will be good as a gamer and as a player. Checking it, I'll take that feature out if it doesn't move numbers. But this is sort of that happy balance. And I don't want to sound like it's like, here's how to spam your friends for money and profit. But it's important to have this balanced view, because this is the reality of running live services. And this is the reality of doing this professionally, is that you need to have this balance. But nor do I want you just to do a bunch of stuff for money, because then you'll make a boring game that people won't like. And if you do it well, and it's possible, you can do a feature that does what you want it to do, and actually the players are happy to participate in and aren't annoyed too much by if they don't. So that's sort of the basics of it. And then I would love to get into any questions and go in depth on either the stuff in here or related topics. So.
We do have a question. It's free-to-play related, but before that, Bill, because you have such an extensive experience with live ops, I mean, 12 years, it's a lot. So you've tested everything. You've learned from fails. You were challenged. You had some great lessons there. If you were to, I think, at one of the biggest challenge that you had working in one live ops project, and you think back and say, wow, that was a big one. And this is a huge lesson I've learned out of that. What would that be?
Okay, so probably one that was a huge problem is the technical. Let's say you have a live service that's successful. this is going way back a ways to Mafia Wars, is we had a data corruption issue, and we essentially cut the game down by 40% that it never recovered from. The key thing that you will lose your players if they lose their data. They can tolerate downtime, they don't like it. Load times will bother them. If they feel like all the time they've put in, all the grind they've put in is somehow compromised or lost, you've done permanent irrecoverable damage. You'll get a little of it back. Don't do that. I know that's not an obvious thing, but it is critical to respect that what players care the most about is that their grind, work is a strong word, but you get my point, that the time they've put in, the numbers that they have so painstakingly improved are safe. So that would be the single biggest thing, because that game instantly went from a very substantial amount of money to much less. It was a disaster. There are other things that are a problem too. I'll go back again to Facebook. It's a little different on mobile for reasons that I can discuss. This is going back a ways for people, but like when Zynga and Facebook were fighting hard years ago, our numbers just went way down across the board because of something that Zynga had no control over. Epic with Fortnite is fighting with Apple right now. That one's fascinating. I don't know what the heck they're thinking on that. It must be something non-obvious, because if they're not careful, they're going to essentially strand millions and millions of users on iOS, because all the kids that play are not going to talk their parents into buying them an Android so they can play Fortnite. So, I would say you have to protect your data and understand that you are at the mercy of outside forces. One of the great things about Roblox is that Roblox has a huge audience on web, and on the web, you control your audience. No one can stop you, do whatever. I mean, you have to comply with the law, but the reality of mobile is that Apple and Google get to arbitrarily say yes or no. Google doesn't want skills on the Play Store. It's not on the Play Store. That's just how it is. Skills would, as an example, as a business, would be worth way more. And those are fights that you should factor in, because you cannot count on everything going right. So that's the biggest problem. So in terms of opportunities, we're going to see an interesting one play out right now. It's not a game, but the stuff with TikTok in the US is really interesting, because if TikTok can't get its stuff together, they're going to instantly hand some other company an instant market of 20% of that audience in the US, right? Because people are used to that format. It's not a particularly difficult format or app to recreate. Someone is going to have a TikTok clone that does, well, I've seen some names that I've never heard of doing it, but someone will in fact pop up. I think hopefully that gives a sense. In terms of overcoming other stuff, I would say the thing about live services that's different is, this is the cliche. It's a terrible cliche, but it's exactly right. You're running a marathon, not a sprint. So like the thing is, you rarely fix stuff instantly. You rarely, data aside or platform aside, break stuff instantly. It's really much more of, it's like being fit, right? If you do your exercise and you eat well, the things tend to go better. It doesn't mean that you'll win, but it's not going to be that one horrible bender when you got drunk and wrecked the house. That would be a console game, or potentially Fortnite. It would be much more like, oh, you've put out some features, everybody sort of, couldn't come up with great stuff, so you put out mediocre stuff. Your elder players start getting sick of it, your pairs start dropping off, and then you realize, oh no, there were really 500 people that spent all the money, and we've just lost 300 of them. And that's from 3 months or 6 months of getting bored with your game, thinking about the next game, just being grumpy, which is a big problem in live services, because I mentioned year 3 as well, because year 3 is usually people are sick of their game if they've been working on it for 3 or 4 years, right? It's hard to maintain focus on that. And that's actually, I would say, one of the strong leadership challenges of having a live service that has success. It's fun when it's growing. CoinMaster is shooting up right now, but like Candy Crush, as an example, I mean, King had people who've been working on that game for 7 years on a puzzle game that was built on Flash for Facebook originally, right? It's sort of human nature to get tired of that. Now, there are things you can do about that, and that would be the topic for another conversation. But that really is a challenge, and stuff like, for example, Amber Academy, these educational things. I will address that briefly. for stuff like Farmville. And at Zynga, we had some older games which were less sort of sexy to work on. And one of the tricks there is, not tricks, but you let people develop their careers. So that, for example, older games like that are a great place for somebody to be promoted and practice leadership. It's a great place to onboard new people. It's a great place to onboard really senior people because you make them do the grind for 3 months. We actually did this at Zynga. It was something Zynga did very well, is we would make people go work on a live game for 3 months when they started. So for example, quite a number of the people in the finance department at Zynga were interns essentially for me on Farmville, which sounds funny, but it was good because they understood the business. And many, many people in games who don't make games want to make games. This may be non-obvious to the audience, but like if you're dealing with a publisher, that accountant, that marketing person, they're at the game company because they actually like games and they actually play games. And they would love to have someone care about their opinion about what a game is. Not that you should or shouldn't, but like they actually like this. Even people who aren't in the game part of a game job are usually there because they like games. And so it's good for there to be exposure. And an old game is a great place to try risky stuff. And it's a great place for somebody, like I would promote general managers at Zynga. I would give them an old game. It'd be like they'd done very well. They were like the third most senior person on Farmville. So I would put them in charge of an older game with the understanding they did a good job on it. They would then get to start a new game. And this gets more into studio management, but this is a high class problem. If this resonates with you, good, because it means you have a game that's lasted a long time and been successful. But you get a sense of some of these challenges. So I would say that generally speaking, you're thinking in months, not in days, about stuff that turns something around. I would say if I can offer one huge, huge lesson from being 20 years in games and having huge hits and some utter failures, some disastrous failures, is stay calm. You're not as smart as people tell you. You're never as smart as people tell you are, and you're not the dumbass that you fear you are, because you'll feel both ways. Stuff works, stuff doesn't. Stuff goes up, stuff comes down. Don't be a jerk because you'll come back down. Don't despair because there will be another round of games coming that hopefully that you can make work. And it's important to just say, you know what? I'm going to be calm. I'm going to be humble. I'm going to actually pay attention to what people are doing, not what I want them to do. But I'm also not going to beat myself up because if I gave it a good try, I tried to do it well, I was thoughtful, it didn't work. Sometimes it doesn't. I can tell you my own personal assumption is I feel great if 1 in 3 games that I make is a hit. My hope is that one's a hit, one makes money, and the other one isn't a mess. So hopefully you get the sense. Hopefully the process. Go ahead.
Good. It's about resilience and trying again. That's good.
Now, I do want to say, if I can offer sort of a color on that, is what I want to be clear is that to me, almost the saddest thing I see is when people do a great job, kill themselves on a bad idea. Right? So this is the trick, because if your game has no traction, it's probably time to go to the next one. So it is about being resilient, but it's really about being realistic. Don't beat yourself up. Don't pat yourself on the back. Make your best guess. Do something smart. Respect what's going on. So it's being resilient, but it's not like, I hate that if you just want it, it will happen. That is not how life works, especially in games. What you can say is, if you want to be in games and have a career in games, that you can achieve. You may be lucky and make the game that you love. Your instinct may be right at the time, but I would say you have to be resilient and assume you're smart enough to be in games. I didn't know anything about games when I started, and I basically lied my way into my first job, which is true of many, many people who started in production. I'm joking a little bit, but I mean, I got my job, everybody, because I ran into somebody I knew who was my buddy's wife's college friend when I lied my way into E3. And I later, 6 months later, got a job in New York City because of that. That is not.
So you were lucky.
100%. Like my career was not like this perfect plan. What helped was I had gone to law school. I was actually a practicing lawyer, and my boss thought that was interesting that here was somebody applying for a pretty junior game job who was a lawyer. But I mean, if I hadn't happened to see that friend out of 30,000 people at E3, I'd probably be a lawyer somewhere in the US instead of doing this. So don't believe people when they say that there's a perfect path. There's just not. Roblox is another good example as a side note. That turned out to be a spectacularly good guess. I will share with everybody my own personal thesis of how I've chosen jobs, is that I love stuff that people play and that they'll spend money on that regular game people think is stupid. I love that. That's just like, I just hear little cash registers going up in my head. That was Zynga. Everybody's like, Facebook games, they suck. Those aren't real games, blah, 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 blah. I guarantee half the people in this audience, if they were old enough, said stuff like that. Right? And you're probably thinking about some slot machine game. You're like, that's a garbage game. Why do people play that? That's so stupid. Well, they're right and you're wrong. If a bunch of people are playing it and a bunch of people are spending money for it, that's a great opportunity. So Zynga was that opportunity. And then Roblox now has sort of gotten sexy. Some of the people listening may have grown up playing it. But people 6 years ago were like, what is this janky Lego thing? And it had been around for 10 years and it had 50 million kids playing it and people still look down on it, right? I joined it because I thought it was a cool product and I was like, oh, this is going to be, it's already successful. How are people not throwing money at these guys? And I joined because I thought it was a cool product and they're good people. I like them. And it was fun working there and that's turned out to be a great idea. And they've blown up even before pandemic, and pandemic's been very successful for them. But I will say the nearest thing I have to sort of a hack in games, this is really a different topic for a different presentation, is I love stuff that I see a lot of people playing and spending money for that the regular game community says is crap. Like it would excite me, like if, for example, Fall Guys, right? If everyone's like, this is a garbage game. I think everybody knows it's fun, but I love that. If you smell that, if all the people you know sort of who are the hardcore gamers are like, this is garbage, but a lot of people are playing, go do that or go do a better version of that. Because at Zynga, they made horrible games when I joined, these awful like Battleship clones, just garbage. But, you know, they had an audience. The only game they had that was substantially any good was poker. And then they had these just garbage little voodoo style games. Sorry, voodoo, but it's true. And then we just came in and made better games to that audience. So that's a very long answer and sort of circuitous, but hopefully helpful.
So let me ask you something else, because you said, okay, don't get stuck in one idea if it doesn't work. Okay, it's okay to be resilient, but not that much in this case. Right. What about reinvention? Do you think it's possible that out of something that is not working to like burst with innovation for something else out of the failed project? And do you have such an example?
I mean, two good ones. One is, two obviously good ones are, Overwatch was the multiplayer mode of Blizzard's Titan game, which they worked on for 8 years before killing. I've heard the guy, I forget David, whatever his name is, who runs the project. They're like, okay, you've got a couple months. Is there anything we can salvage? And a bunch of them were Call of Duty heads. So they're like, can we just take our multiplayer mode and let's modify it? And they're like, okay. And it worked. Worked very, very successfully. An even more interesting example, and one that really sort of encapsulates a lot of learning, is Epic had built Fortnite as this sort of survival, sort of post-apocalyptic building game. And it was a failure. It was not making its numbers. The name made no sense, right? Fortnite, what? And they're like, okay, we're going to close this down. In the meantime, PlayerUnknown's Battleground, or whatever it's called, PlayerUnknown Battleground, which was his ripoff, I think, of some Sony game that he had made with Sony, came out, was climbing up the charts. Epic very wisely was like, we have an engine that's better than this already. Let's put in that stuff into Fortnite, and off it went. And I would love to hear, I'm sure they're honest about it, because there's no way you could tell any other story about Fortnite. But the thing was, in both cases, they were playing to strengths of stuff they've done. Like, you don't want to bang your head into the concrete wall, but they're not just some schmoes who came in and did it, right? Epic had spent years making an excellent engine. The Blizzard folks, you know, it was the multiplayer mode that they'd already done all this good work on. And then they were opportunistic and figured out what to do with this cool thing they had. And that generally is a good pattern. So those are the real turnarounds. Mm-hmm. But what's critical there is that was built on a bunch of good underlying work, that the benefit of which was obvious. If I'm like, hey, don't you want an engine that works on every platform that's a good shooter engine? Yes, I want that engine. In both cases, that's what those guys had. Mm-hmm. And by the way, Fortnite's interesting because Roblox had actually taught a ton of kids how to use those shooter controls. So just as an interesting side note in talking about those examples. Mm-hmm. One other example actually on the chart, one other one is Coin Master's an interesting example, because that game was done, I believe, in 2010 or 2011 as a Facebook game. Did nothing. They came out and they made it free to play like 5 years later, did nothing. Then a game called Pirate Kings came along, started doing very well. They said, I'm sure they said, our game is a lot like this game that's getting traction. Let's just rework our game. Started to get traction in 2016, grew pretty steadily, and then grew exponentially in the last year. And it's been consistently #1 on the Google Play Store in the West for months and months. So that's probably the most extreme mobile example. Gardenscapes is a fascinating example because that was a long time hidden object like PC game that they adapted. No one liked the PC, no one liked the hidden object on the phone. So they're like, hey, let's slap in a match 3. It worked. Candy Crush, those guys have been very honest. They made, I forget what their numbers, I think we made 280 games and 279 failed until we made Candy Crush. And Clash of Clans, they basically made a better version of a game called Desktop Monsters, and Supercell's heyday was a better version of Farmville. Like, I hope what you're hearing here is if you look at the games you really love and you look at them closely is, they make something good, it's often based on something else, right? So hopefully that's helpful.
Cool. We have another question here for someone. It's about in-app purchases. So how far can we push the in-app purchases on a free-to-play model game? Should we stop on the cosmetics only? Is the Battle Pass trending the perfect business model for the in-app purchases of a free-to-play game?
Okay, so I would describe in-app purchases in about 4 different buckets, okay? There's the cosmetic stuff. There is the permanently better at the game stuff. Those are sort of the 2 poles. There is stuff that accelerates me for a while. And then there is stuff that gives me, there's stuff that accelerates me for a while, and then there is unlocking content. I don't like the unlocking content because it's terrible to build stuff that only a tiny percentage of people would use. Cosmetic is important if your game is skill-based. You're probably living in that world, because if you don't, you're breaking the fundamental promise of that game. Right? If I make a shooter and you can buy a gun that's way better, Call of Duty did this, and I think people all flipped out about it on Black Ops, where there were better guns you could buy. That violates sort of the core expectation there, right? The temporary acceleration, the classic way is I buy through a timer in a mobile game, or I buy one more move if I'm stuck on a puzzle game, or in some ways I buy a Battle Pass. Battle Pass is sort of a combination of that temporary content and acceleration. Those generally are very good. The permanent acceleration for everything is dangerous. And the danger with that is you're giving away the cow instead of the milk. And I'll give you an example of where we avoided that problem. And this is not, it doesn't actually give you the in-game benefit. But if I could spend $20, actually I'll step back to it. If I could spend $20 and double the number of lives I got in a puzzle game, if I'm a player, I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to spend less. Puzzle games typically monetize very well by the end game move, right? I'm like 3 moves away, I buy 5 moves. And you sell it to me in such a way I have some leftover currency. If I double my moves for $20, you've given away the thing that they really want, so they're going to pay less forever on anything else. So you have to be really careful about permanent benefit. A better version of that is, let's say you sell, I'm not super knowledgeable about Destiny, but if there's an arena type event and you sell an event that's better, a weapon that's better in that arena for that type for a period of time, okay, they have a benefit. A lot of people will buy it. A lot of other people will complain about it, but you're limiting the damage because it doesn't last forever. So the question is, and how you fit in that, I would say, what is the essence of my game? I would sell all 4 in some version, but I'd be very slow about selling that permanent benefit. Season Pass, in many ways, is sort of an attempt to do that in a time-contained manner. So you'll see it in a lot of mobile games and a lot of other games. If I subscribe to Season Pass, I get some cosmetics, I get some temporary benefit on the leaderboard for that season, so I can give a permanent benefit for that leaderboard. But then, oops, I didn't break my game forever and ever because I can do a different season with different rules. And generally, by the way, seasons are an adaptation from the live event stuff that really, from my perspective, came around on Facebook and then really has become permanently a huge feature in mobile. And that's great because that means, oops, you break something. Okay, the event ends, try something else. Is that a helpful answer? Hopefully the person asking that feels like, if anything, that was too much information.
So please feel free to comment. No says thank you. And we have a question, a curiosity from someone who actually added before joining the webinar. So the topic was very appealing and wanted to find out something particularly from you. How can you make a successful free-to-play game without microtransactions?
I think you have a big problem. Really, the only really successful way I can think about that did it is Words with Friends, which no one ever thinks about, but it makes a ton of money on ads. The whole point of free to play is if you're going to make a game for money, you have to get money somewhere. You can sell it once, typical model. You can sell it on subscription, okay. If it's free to play, someone's paying for it somewhere, so it's either ads or somebody is doing it, and generally that's microtransactions. So I don't know what else there is to say, but you're not going to have a free to play game without microtransactions or ads. Take your pick.
Cool. Good advice. Good to know. Guys, if you have other questions, please jump in and let us know. Also on Facebook, you can write on comments. We are just preparing to wrap up. So it was a really interesting conversation, Bill, and thank you so much for sharing from your experience. I think we had so many curiosities from our people here, and the fact that you answered all of them, it's really cool. It's one of the best way to learn from others who experience different models. So it's great.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Any
okay.
last
I don't think so. I'm looking here in the Q&A. It seems that we're clear. People are saying thank you. I want to thank you as well. It was a very interesting topic. Hope you guys enjoyed it and took a lot of valuable lessons out of there. And we really hope to see you at the next webinar. Bill, thanks again. Guys, stay safe and see you next week with a new webinar. Stay in touch with our Facebook page, with Amber's Facebook page, and you'll see what's coming up next. Thank you, Bill.
Take care,
Have a great day, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks, bye-bye.